Hi guys, so before we go on to 6.4, you need to have a quick recap of 6.1 to 6.4 actually using different ratios instead of just one. So remember we started out with Pythagoras, this guy right here, and did a whole lesson on just that. Then we did a whole lesson on just sine, cos, and tan. So one for sine, one for cos, one for tan, and you never really had to pick which of these four things you needed to use. So that's what we are going to do in this little mini lesson. So remember, sine, cos, and tan, if I have an angle, here's my opposite side, my adjacent side, and across from my right angle, I have my hypotenuse. Okay. So first question, determine the lengths of side x. So here I have an angle. Here is my side opposite that angle. Here is my adjacent. And here is across from my right angle, my hypotenuse. Now, my steps are going to be the same as they've always been. So my first step is always to label my triangle. So I've labeled it in accordance with the angle that I'm given. My second step is going to be to circle 3, and this is going to be an actual important step now. So circling 3, so two things that I know and one that I need to find. Okay. So I know this opposite side, I know this angle, and I'm trying to find the adjacent side. So now, since I circled an angle, I'm going to be using sine, cos, or tan. I know that because sine, cos, and tan have angles in it. Pythagoras does not have any angles. So I circled my opposite and adjacent sides. So here, if I had circled opposite and hypotenuse, I would use sine, but I didn't. I didn't circle the hypotenuse, so I can't use cos either because I need the hypotenuse circled for cos. So I will be using tan. So tan of my angle will be opposite, which is 6.4, divided by my adjacent, which I'm trying to find. So that is the ratio I need to use. So our third step is we choose and write our ratio. Or I guess not just ratio, choose and write the equation that we will be using. So I'm going to shorten equation to just being EQN. So we have chosen tan. So tan of my angle. So tan of my angle, and my angle is A, is going to be the opposite side divided by the adjacent side. Okay, substituting in. So tan of 52 degrees equals my opposite, which is 6.4, divided by my adjacent, which is x. Okay, so WAM10, proportion central. Let's turn this into a proportion. So here I have what I'm looking for. So I will be dividing by the one across what I'm looking for and multiplying these two together. So to find x, I will be doing 6.4 times 1, which is just 6.4, divided by tan 52 degrees. Putting that into our calculator. So making sure we are in degrees mode. And 6.4 times 1, which is 6.4, divided by tan of 52. Equals, and we get 5.00022, so on and so forth. Like that. Okay, lastly, I didn't say what to round to here in the question, but let's just round to the nearest decimal place for all these answers. So just 5.0. We could even just say 5 here. Okay, so x equals 5.0, and then we would put our units in, but this does not really have any units. So for questions that do have units, don't forget your units. So x equals 5.0, or you could have just even had x equals 5. I would be fine with. Okay, second question. So I am not given any of my angles. So since I'm not given any of my angles, that is kind of a hint that I might not be using sine, cos, or tan right now. So taking a look, let's start with number 2. Let's circle 3. So 2 things that we know. So I know this side and this side, and I know I want to find this side. So when I circle 3 sides, here these ratios only have 2 sides, and you need an angle. For the Pythagorean theorem, though, I have 2 sides and another side. So I will be using my Pythagorean theorem when I circle 3 sides. Here, I have to use these guys when one of the things that I circle is an angle. So for this, I will be using my Pythagorean theorem. So a squared plus b squared equals c squared. So here across from, this is a, here I have my b, here my hypotenuse is c. Okay, so a squared, so 5.7 squared plus 4.2 squared equals c squared, so x squared in this case. Write exponents first, so the square of 5.7 is 32.49 plus the square of 40.2, which is 17.64, then equals x squared. Okay, so we substituted, now we're solving, so 32.49 plus 17.64, we get 50.13 x squared. Lastly, we need to square root our x, so don't forget to square root at the end. So this 50.13 is x squared, not x. So square rooting gets rid of that squared, and we get x equals 7.0802, so on and so forth, to 1 decimal place. Stopping there, take a peek over the wall. I'm going to have to round that 0 up to a 1. So x equals 7.1, and you would put units, but there's no units for this one. So 7.1. Okay. Lastly, oh, I do have an angle. So let's label according to our angle. So here's our angle, 65 degrees. This is opposite our angle. Here is adjacent, and here is our hypotenuse. So once I have it labeled, let's circle 3, 2 things I know and 1 that I don't. So I know an angle, I know its adjacent side, and I'm trying to find the hypotenuse. Okay, so as soon as I circle an angle, I know I'm not going to be using Pythagoras. So I'd need 2 sides for Pythagoras that I know and then 1 that I don't. So I will be using sine, cos, or tan. Now adjacent and hypotenuse, so opposite and hypotenuse is sine, adjacent and hypotenuse, that's cos. So tan, I would need to know the opposite, which I don't. So adjacent and hypotenuse, I will be using cos for this example. So cos, writing it out, cos of my angle, so cos of B equals adjacent divided by my hypotenuse. Okay, substituting in. So cos of 65 degrees equals adjacent, which is 7, divided by my hypotenuse, which is x. Let's just turn that into a proportion. So looking for this one, so I'll be dividing by cos 65 and doing 7 times 1. So x will be 7 times 1 divided by cos 65. So 7 times 1 is just 7, divided by cos of 65 degrees, and into our calculators, get 16.5634, so on and so forth, to 1 decimal place. Stopping there, take a peek over, I'm going to have to round that 5 up to a 6. So x equals 16.6, and we don't have units, so x is 16.6. Okay, so the biggest thing here, you guys, is just how we were circling 3, and it didn't really matter last time. It's going to be important now to circle your 3, especially if you're having problems figuring out which ratio, or if you're supposed to use the Pythagorean theorem, you're supposed to use. So in order to figure out which one of these you need to use, if you circle 3 sides, you're using Pythagoras. if you have circled an angle and then two sides, you're going to be using SOHCAHTOA. And honestly, just have SOHCAHTOA written at the very top of every page, so you don't have to look back or anything. Just write it right out to make your lives a little bit easier as you're doing your work. Okay,